Hello. So, I'm going to skip most of the BS that I've kind of been repeating about this stuff that I'm recently been talking about for the Earthbound series, just because I think you get the idea at this point. But, so, I'm going to be talking about, this time, Apple Kid, as well as the Apple of Enlightenment, or in Japan, the Apple of Wisdom, this device, this thing. Basically, my analysis of the symbolism or whatever involving these things and this person, Apple Kid and such, so let's get to it. At the beginning of the game, I don't think any character references this Apple of Enlightenment or this Apple of Wisdom, whatever you want to call it, until, later in the game. I think the earliest person might be Starman Jr., the first Gygas's direct minions that you actually fight with Buzz helping you. He might mention that. But the closest thing would be Buzz saying that his society prophesizes a child and 3 other of his friends are going to destroy this evil entity, Gygas or whatever, this ultimate evil. And then only until later do you ever really get a reference about this thing directly, the Apple of Wisdom, the Apple of Enlightenment. And interesting enough, called the Apple of Wisdom in Japan, and in Japan, some line of text directly mentions that it is some kind of machine, this thing, that in English, for whatever, it's never mentioned about it being machine, which is kind of weird. It kind of does change things a little bit with that in some ways, but not that much, I guess. It's not that important. So the first kind of thing, I'm pretty sure besides that you get reference to, with any kind of apple, is actually one of the people that you meet in Tucson to actually make progress is this kid, Apple Kid, who lives right next door to this other asshole Orange Kid. But this Apple Kid, he's like a slob. People don't really give him much respect or anything. His house is messy and stuff. But if you give this Apple Kid some funding or some funding to do his inventions or something, he will actually help you immensely. He is required to actually progress in the game in many places. And it's interesting in that way. I know that a lot of RPGs kind of have these things, these MacGuffins, I think they're called. I think that's the term, the literary term or whatever. Or it's just kind of oh, there's this impassable thing at this point in time in your adventure, and then all of a sudden this thing comes out of nowhere that resolves it or something. Just this random event or some shit. And in this case, for many of those things, it happens to be Apple Kid. He actually invents so many weird things. The first one, the pencil eraser, the zombie flypaper, trout-flavored yogurt machine, the eraser, and as well as he helps Dr.Andonuts and the Mr.Saturn create the phase distorter. Which is interesting too, is that Dr. Andonuts and the Mr.Saturn only really get to meet each other because of Gygas's orders, I guess you could say, to his minions, the Starmen, when they are abducted and brought together in that underground base. And when you break them out, they wouldn't have gotten to really meet each other and even conceive probably of making something like this phase distorter. Yeah, once again, Gygas foiling himself or going through his own destiny kind of to lead to eventually to his own destruction or whatever, his own defeat. But that's kind of the point I want to make with Apple Kid is that, so apples, I looked just on the second link, it wasn't Wikipedia, but the second link on Google was some stuff for what does an apple symbolize? And it just listed a few things. 1, temptation, which I guess would be the forbidden fruit would be the temptation kind of in the Garden of Eden. Immortality. I don't know why the apple symbolizes immortality in some things. I know weirdly enough in Minecraft, I just thought about this, in Minecraft you can make golden apples basically give you some kind of immortality, for all intents and purposes, which is interesting. But then, as the one that we're referring to, wisdom, as another one that's for apples, the power, and love, whatever the power is, but love as well. So apples symbolize quite a bit. It's probably fairly obvious because they are referenced all the time. Apples are used so often to kind of represent things. I feel like nobody really asks why, I guess. The Apple Kid, the fact that he has this name and he has this symbol attached to him, Apple, it kind of just makes me think, I put this theory out there on the stupid Earthbound subreddit or whatever, just because I was this one is normie friendly enough that, I'll see what their reaction is to it. But I think it legitimately stands as a fair interpretation, fair theory, whatever you want to say, I think that Apple Kid is a physical manifestation of fate or destiny, whatever. Like, the way I put it is that the apple of enlightenment, the apple of wisdom, this machine that we were told is, for whatever reason, it's called this. It's a machine, but why is it called Apple? That's the weird part about it. But this thing, it gives prophecies. It is the speaker, it is the teller, it is the messenger of fate, of destiny. At the end of the day, you have to think that destiny kind of needs almost a avatar or some kind of physical thing to actually potentially bring fate. It sounds silly maybe, but to actually bring fate on the path that it wants, that it's supposed to be directed or whatever. Like, something to allow fate and destiny to occur is that there's probably some quote-unquote interference necessary, possibly in some places, for that to really happen, I guess. And in this case, what I'm saying is that this Apple Kid, he is the physical manifestation, the physical avatar, the physical incarnation of fate and destiny itself in this context. The stuff that he makes, it's only there for like one very specific purpose, which one makes it kind of funny, like, oh man, he made like a pencil eraser, what the heck? He made a trout flavored yogurt machine, what the heck? So, you know, it could be like a comedic effect and all that stuff. Really, to me, it says more than that, because it's like, okay, he does these super specific things, like, as soon as you hit a roadblock, pretty much, in any part of Ness's journey here, not every time, but in many cases, Apple Kid, he immediately calls him up. As soon as you hit one of these roadblocks, Apple Kid almost always calls you like a moment later and says, hey, oh, by the way, I'm sending this thing over I invented, just this random thing, but if actually it's the thing that you need to progress next, huh? So he's really the only reason that you're able to get through your journey as you do and fulfill your Ness's destiny, and as the Talking Inside for Rock said, Ness is the fate of the universe as well. It is intertwined. Apple Kid inventing these MacGuffins for almost every roadblock Ness gets on his journey just kind of shows to me like, yeah, he's the physical manifestation of fate, destiny in a human form or whatever, in this physical form. That is what his duty is to the universe, whatever. That is what he is meant to do. Even if he just only invented the things that get him through the initial roadblocks and stuff. But the fact that he is also there, and Dr. Andonuts even says that Apple Kid, you know, helped them a lot. He's a very bright, brilliant kid or whatever. Helps them make the phase distorter. Like, who knows who did most of the work with the phase distorter? It was probably the Mr.Saturns from what it sounds like. But at the same time, he was involved in helping create this phase distorter, which in the end of the day gets Ness and his friends to go back in time and fight and defeat Gygas and fulfill his fate. Yeah, that's my theory about Apple Kid himself. I don't really have much to say about the Apple of Enlightenment or the Apple of Wisdom itself, because maybe it speaks for itself. I can't really personally interpret much more of what I've already said, I guess. Like, I don't know why Gygas made this. Whoever made this. I don't know how he got his hands on this supposed machine, you know, where it comes from. I can't really think of anything, but the fact that it is called the Apple of Blank is very strange, for one thing, just the symbolism of it. Another thing I found funny is, when I was doing Google search Apple of Enlightenment, apparently there is a Yu-Gi-Oh card with the exact name Apple of Enlightenment. And Yu-Gi-Oh is made in Japan, so I have a feeling that maybe Apple of Wisdom is often mistranslated or something from Japan to English to instead Apple of Enlightenment or something. That's just a weird thought I had. But yeah, that's basically what I want to say, is what my feelings are on what Apple Kid sort of represents and what his role is in general as a character, and the interesting connection between the Apple of Enlightenment, the Apple of Wisdom, and Apple Kid himself, and them both being involved with fate, destiny, in some way, just both with their symbols. But besides that, I wanted to bring up two other little interesting things I thought about. So, isn't it funny? At least to me, after I realized how BS and bullshit the whole school system is and everything. At least in the US, as far as I remember, apples, at least a red apple would always be like a representation or something, a symbol of like a school teacher for some reason. It's funny because from what I learned, in many cases, most cases, in my experience, the teachers representing like this apple, like these things that can represent wisdom and such, they're like the exact opposite of that. Like in many cases, somebody who teaches they teach because they cannot do. And these teachers, especially in these public schools and everything, even the colleges, everything, they don't have what anyone, like, I would ever define as something like wisdom, like something like that, because all they do is basically regurgitate crap that they don't actually understand. They just read in their textbooks in a thing. They've never done any of the stuff that they're teaching, and them being symbolized with the apple is just kind of like the great irony of it, is that they have no wisdom. They're the opposite of that, basically. And the other one, I guess you could say, is synchronicity with this kind of thing, is that Christoph mentioned in one of his from a video series a few months back about something, a solar corona mass ejection or something like that, if I remember, is he was watching this animation that I guess is pretty popular just because of its kind of like weirdness, but at the same time all of its like pretty obvious symbolism, so it's like, yeah, kind of creepy stuff at the same time. But this, I guess you could say, channel or animation, I Pet Goat, and for some reason one of the things he was thinking of coronal mass ejection, when this girl that he thought represents the sun dropped this apple, and then it like split, and then it like sprouted into something. And yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I found it kind of interesting. So it's like, you know, maybe the apple can also represent something like the sun almost. I don't know. The apple has so many things that it can represent. The fact that it is so prevalent. And it's also one of the most common fruits that I know of, like, in the world. I couldn't think of any place that probably doesn't have apples, like, fairly commonly. Like, in America, apples are super common. Like, they're the most common fruit you'll find basically in any store, and for a fairly reasonable price. That's why I personally like apples, because they taste good, they're refreshing, whatever, and they're relatively cheap. Yeah, and they last a while. Just apples their symbolism and everything is so strange throughout the society, this world, and everything. They mean a lot more than people might give them credit for, and I just wanted to bring that up involving this game specifically with its symbolism. That's just what I wanted to talk about today. I never would have ever thought about, like, the theory, whatever I had about Applecade ever. Like, that wouldn't have been something I would have ever have considered until I kind of, my eyes, the veil was lifted or whatever. And then when I kind of looked at it, I was like, wow, that is like almost, to me, like, obvious, like, how he represents this kind of thing that I mentioned, like a embodiment, a manifestation of destiny or whatever. It is so strange now that I think about it. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that, get that topic done. Most likely, I will talk about next the Mr. Saturns and what I think that is interesting about them and their the symbolism, whatever, of Saturn especially, and what they do. But I'll see you in the next video, and as always, thanks for watching.